Now, the Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls has angered unions by saying Labour would not commit to reversing government spending cuts or a public sector pay cap. In a speech to party supporters, Mr Balls said creating jobs would be a higher priority than pay rises. He also admitted Labour faced a big task to win back economic credibility and public trust. Well, I spoke to Ed Balls earlier today, and I began by asking him about the downgrade to France's credit rating. Can I begin by asking you about all these Eurozone downgrades? I mean, don't the downgrades show that the markets and the agencies, at least, believe that George Osborne will get the deficit down? They believe in him.
Well, I read the reports from the agencies. What they say, the reason why there's downgrades is because austerity alone can't do the trick. In fact, they say, cutting spending in this way in the euro area can be self-defeating. Without growth, you can't get deficits down. The irony is we are not in the Eurozone. George Osborne is making the same mistake, which the rating agencies say is leading to the downgrades in the Eurozone. Austerity, self-defeating, high unemployment, not getting the deficit down. I can't believe we're making the Euro mistake when we're not in the Euro.
OK, today you're saying you're going to have to accept that you can't reverse the spending cuts, tax rises and real terms pay cuts in the public sector. Have you changed your mind about anything here, or is this what you always thought?
Well, look, I've been consistent all along saying that cutting too far and too fast wouldn't work. I've said it would lead to higher unemployment, wouldn't get the deficit down. That's proving to be true. What that means is the inheritance for Labour is going to be very hard indeed. I'm saying today we can't promise now in 3 years' time to reverse spending cuts or tax rises. We don't know where we're going to be. It's going to be very hard. And I'm also saying in the meantime, and this is really hard for people working in the public and private sectors, it's the reality, George Osborne's failure means that pay restraint will have to continue. Without that, we'll have higher unemployment. Jobs must come first. That's the reality. And it helps me to say that, to show to you I'm credible and tough in setting out an alternative to George Osborne.
But what credibility do you gain if you are continuing to oppose the cuts, but saying we won't do anything to reverse them?
Well, I'm saying, look,
you're not pleasing anyone there.
Look, 3 years out, Krishna, if I said to you, I know in 3 years' time, Labour will be able to spend more and tax less, you would say you're not credible.
But let's just get a few things clear. If you were Chancellor right now, you would still want to borrow more, wouldn't you? Well,
look, George Osborne's borrowing £158 billion more.
But let's just talk about what you want to do.
Any government now would be borrowing. The question is, are you borrowing to get unemployment down, or are you borrowing to pay for the cost of rising unemployment?
You can also be clear, though, now, can't you, that if you are elected at the next election, there will have to be more cuts?
Well, I fear that George Osborne's promise to get rid of the deficit in a parliament is just not going to happen. To be honest, it never was, because that was too fast.
Well, it wasn't going to happen under Labour's plan either, was it? So, I mean, there will have to be more cuts in the next parliament.
The great irony is that George Osborne is borrowing more than under Labour's plan to halve the deficit because he's failing so badly. There is no doubt, as Ed Miliband said earlier this week, the inheritance for Labour will be difficult. We'll have to have continued restraint. It's going to be difficult on spending.
And more cuts.
The key to this is, can you get growth in the economy and unemployment falling? Look, I'm not denying from you at all, Krishna, it's going to be difficult and we will not be able to spend the money we'd like to spend, and it may well be there'll have to be some cuts we don't want to make. And I can't promise to reverse any of the cuts now. I've got to say, though, abolishing the Future Jobs Fund and pushing up youth unemployment, what a foolish cut from George Osborne. It's made things worse, not better.
What's the point of the Labour Party if it wants to cut the pay of some of the poorest public sector workers in Britain?
Well, because socialism is the language of priorities, as Bevan said. And the question is now, is the priority more pay for people in work when unemployment is so high, or does restraint allow us to have more jobs?
Well, it's real terms cuts, isn't it, what you call restraint?
Look, I think it's very difficult indeed what's happening for public and private sector workers. It's a consequence of George Osborne's failure, but I can't argue for higher wages at the expense of jobs. It is about priorities, and jobs must come first.
Ed Balls talking to me earlier.